So Karl, you've worked in hospitality for 20 years in South Africa, in London and Australia. You moved to recruitment, and then you've done a bit of work in marketing for AI digital. You've also done a bit of work in holistic wellness. Can you tell me what is holistic wellness to you, and what's the work that you've done in there?
Absolutely, thanks. Well, Ethan, first of all, thanks so much for having me today. Holistic wellness, as the term implies, is the whole side of wellness. And I think what's important is we forget or we lose sight that we are whole beings. And we need to have a look at what that means across a couple of metrics. So how healthy or how well is your body via your diet, your mind via your mindful intent, and the other metrics that flow from that. So it's the full package, and it can be a little bit intimidating for a lot of people. You know, how do I attack the full package of it? But yeah, quite certainly it's about consistent persistence in terms of chipping away at that. So, and yeah, once you get it right in terms of the holistic aspect, you start feeling a little bit better across a few metrics, and your vitality powers up, and that helps you. It certainly helped me in my career. As you've mentioned, hospitality can be pretty brutal, especially the hours in hospo, dealing with guests and owners and staff and all sorts of things. And then across various countries as well. You just need to make sure that, that you're as healthy and happy as you possibly can be at any one stage. And that I would say is the holistic side of it. And there's so many little offshoots that you can go off down that rabbit hole. But I think for everybody it's different. Everybody's got different abilities or level of ability. But it's really about your intent to move towards that space.
Yeah, and you've talked about how you can apply that to the corporate environment. So what are the main impacts that, holistic wellness would make on, say, the people's performance and also just their personal health?
Yeah, well, very much so. I think when you have a look specifically at any kind of role, be it hospitality or sales or even the corporate structures, which are a little bit more rigid in terms of expectations, you really want to enhance your performance at any one of those. So it doesn't matter whether you're an Olympic athlete. Obviously, they've got some really good modalities to make sure that they're scoring the gold as far as possible. You want to enhance your performance to make sure that your deliverables and that which you're bringing to the party is as good as possible for yourself, for your own benefit, and of course for your pride of work and for the results that you hope to achieve. And so having that holistic wellness approach and having more vitality across these different metrics of body and mind means that you are going to perform better and perhaps be a little bit more creative if your role is a creative role. And let's face it, even in corporate structures, you do need to be quite creative. Think outside the box, they always say. Bring your best game type of thing is applicable whether you're a lawyer, Olympian, baker or banker, I guess, so that wellness ties back to all elements.
And what does that do for authenticity? Is that a different category or?
I think it is a different category. Authenticity would be something that really comes forth or really comes to the fore once your cup is full, once you've really achieved the baseline levels of where you would like to go, what you would like to achieve. That comes from a space of authenticity. I do CrossFit every day, and I do it for my own level at the level I do. It is scaled for a variety of athletes, and you can really perform. You can become very competitive. You can lift all the heavy weights. It's the same CrossFit box with the same coach and the same modality and the same teaching. However, you get to choose your own adventure, and you choose the layer or the level at which you want to be. Personally, I don't compete against anyone. I compete against myself, obviously, because I do want to be that 1% better every day. And I think that's where my personal authenticity comes out. If somebody wants to be an absolute power lifter and go for the RX Plus or go for gold, if that's their authenticity, then they should be nurtured and supported in that. You've got people who've had life experiences where they've either lost a limb or something, and you even see them at that level competing, sometimes even better than able-bodied people, because they've got that drive and that spark that makes them authenticate their movement in a way that's very meaningful for them.
Yeah, and what is metacognitive thinking? I've seen you've done a bit of work on that. Can you tell me a bit about what that is?
Yeah. I love metacognitive thinking, and actually it's something that I've only recently found out in the past 5 years, I suppose. So metacognition is thinking about thinking. It's actually not just having these thoughts blindly go through your head that we act and operate on, which I think a lot of people do. It's taking this thought and stopping it in your head and go, oh, hold on.
Is that mindfulness?
It is mindfulness. So mindfulness, metacognition are just two sides of the same coin. You know, the Buddhists have been teaching mindfulness for thousands of years, and that mindfulness is pause, observation, observe your thoughts, they teach us. Move towards loving kindness, they teach us. So that's a ancient tradition. But then, of course, we have science now, which calls that metacognizance. And that really just comes from the Greek or the Latin meta, above thinking, is simply what it means.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. You're just thinking above the level of thinking. How do you do that? It is a bit difficult because typically we run on the same thought processes every day. Think for yourself. Get out of bed, put your feet down, go through the process, do this, do that, brush your teeth, have your breakfast, go off to work, do the same sort of thing all the time. So in a way, a lot of humans are on autopilot, and we don't challenge that thinking. We don't think about thinking. And so it can be a little bit tricky in the beginning to first do that. But once you get your little fingernails under that, you realize that you can stop thoughts. You can. What I love, I learned this recently, Ethan, and it takes a little bit of thinking about it to let it drop. Thoughts are simply objects in consciousness. So thoughts are simply objects in consciousness. And you say, how can a thought be an object? It's just this ethereal thing. And yet it is. A thought is an object in your head that you get to stop and turn around and twist around and go, this thought that I normally let flow through 100 times is now being stopped and it's being turned around. And where did it come from? What does it mean? Does it give me value? Does it serve me? Do I flick it out of my head because it's of no value? Or do I take it and shine it into something new and robust to prepare me for my path forward as I move towards the man I would become, the person I would become, the authenticity that I have in my head.
And one thing about so being able to observe your thoughts, can that be developed further into possibly controlling your thoughts when they might get a bit out of control? Absolutely.
And I think that's one of the really good silver linings about it, is that you get to then not manipulate. I'd suggest you can tame your thoughts, and a lot of us don't know that we can tame our thoughts. We've got this roiling mind of all sorts of things. And I think for some of us who are a little bit neurodiverse, all sorts, it can be a challenge at times. However, with that practice, you get to refine those thoughts. You get to see how they serve you, and you can build from that state. And it really is amazing, because I've called it, for my own personal structure, whatever I was taught, whatever trauma was enforced, whatever all the things were put in my head, I get to now challenge those and decide which ones are going to work for me. And I call that crafting my own empire of experience. So I get to rebuild this city of skyscrapers or whatever open spaces. And when you do that, you've got this really cool shifting dynamic where you can craft your own empire of experience according to your needs and the space and time that you're at the moment.
Yeah, and I was just wondering how you can actually put that into practice. What are the ways you can do it, like say meditation or something? But because I've got ADHD, so do you, and it's definitely hard to control your thoughts. They're always racing. Like there's sometimes those nights where you just can't stop thinking and you can't really calm down. So what are the practices that you would put into place for someone facing those struggles?
Yeah, really good question, and it is a struggle, especially with I call my type of ADHD that very special squirrel mind ADHD. So it's always moving along. But what I've learned to do is tie that into what I'm trapped in at the moment. Now, the mind is eternal and goes everywhere, but the body is finite where it is. And I've done a bit of research in terms, again, of the ancient Indian or mystic traditions where they use the mudras or the hand things. And there's one called the Khetri mudra where you go like that, and it's really, really lovely. And it actually forces you to pause. It traps you in this, and you align yourself. Oh, dude, it's a big one. So you want to go like 2 hands like that. You turn this one over. Then slowly you put your finger through other way, through there, like that. And then you just interleave all of them. And gently you want to put your fingertips together like that. Don't worry where the thumbs are. And you just want to hold it for a bit. Everybody's got different mobility. The more you do it, the better it is. And after a small amount of time, not too long, you'll actually feel your pulse pulsing through the top of your fingers.
Yeah, I can feel it.
Doom, doom. Now that immediately traps you in your body. So your mind is now bonding you into this sort of thought process. And again, all you need to do is go back to the breath. So you take the physical elements that you have, being the hand mudra and the breath, and you just focus on the air in, air out, air in, air out. And you can actually empty your mind in a way that allows you to sit and meditate. You're supposed to do this for 20 minutes every day. I have been doing this for about 2 months, and I struggle to get to about 10 minutes. I absolutely struggle. And that's a bad, sad indictment that I can't take 20 minutes out of my day to meditate. I put an alarm on my phone, and I'm doing this for a while, and then all of a sudden I'm untwisted. I pick up my phone, I do something, and I'm like, the spell is broken. So it definitely is a big challenge for us fractured consciousness, time poor, attention deficited people to actually do this. And yet when you do it, when I have done it, Ethan, I've actually been quite staggered by the power that comes from it, and the stillness of mind without the medication is a bit of a... So do it more and more. 20 minutes a day, I challenge everyone to attempt to or move towards it, or 1% better on that score every day.
Yeah, it's like the saying, if you don't have 5 minutes to meditate per day, you should be doing it for 10. But
very that.
Yeah, for people who don't really like the whole spirituality thing and the, all that sort of stuff, is there any science backing that sort of method and any proven results?
Absolutely. And again, there's a huge litany of research and studies and science-backed peer-reviewed journals that demonstrate time and time again across multiple cohorts of different demographics that the more you do still your mind through meditation and mindful techniques, the slew of benefits that come from that is incalculable. And so, of course, there is the woo-woo and there is the spirit. However, we're seeing more and more and more how these metrics are aligning with the science, where they're telling us that, yes, a calm mind does exist and can be achieved through the sitting and through the meditating. It just... I'm glad we're kind of going down this. It's a bit of a dangerous topic, I suppose, in terms of the spirituality. But it's regardless of who you are or what you believe in or your spiritual practice, there certainly is a lot of beneficial results, science-backed results, again, from taking the time to slow down, to introspect. And indeed, all of the major spiritual traditions have that prayer time, where it is a forced quiet time to be with your own thoughts, and whether those thoughts are with you and your creator or giving thanks, whoever that is, no one actually needs to know. That's your spiritual practice. And I think that's where a lot of people would respect that. So even in the spiritual element, thousands of years of spiritual practice, they all have that commonality of the slowdown, the pause, the prayer, the meditation, whatever name you call it. It's the same stillness of mind in contemplation of a God, the God, yourself, all sorts of things. So meditation actually cuts across science, spirituality, religion, mindfulness, holisticness. And I think that's the key core concept in terms of that meditative or holistic space.
Yeah. And I was thinking, regardless of religion, most religions do involve prayer But if you're looking at prayer from a more, like, it's, it's been proven and everything, but if you're looking at prayer from a more secular perspective, is there something about prayer that scientifically makes an impact?
I'm not too certain about that. I would suggest the feeling inside me is that if we went onto the electric Google machine and had a look at that, we'd actually probably find evidence that does suggest that, that does speak to that. So I'm pretty certain that it would be. I can really only speak to my own personal sort of vibe in that regard. But yeah, I think that there would actually be evidence for that, and even from a secular basis. And then, what is that? How do we deconstruct that? How do we metacognitize that? Type thing. So there's orders of magnitude, I suppose, from whoever or wherever you are, all the way back up to source. I think can be demonstrated. That's the one thing that everybody will agree on.
Yeah. And then on a different note, we were talking earlier before we started this about ritual-infused habit stacking. Can you explain to me a bit more about what this is and how it changed your life?
Well, there you go. And it came across to me. One of my friends read Atomic Habits. I didn't read it, but I think that's exactly where it is. Because when we are in a stage of life where we want or feel or crave the need for change, because things aren't going well, I wish I could be all of the other things that I'm not right now. It seems a huge task to do that. So a lot of people will 1st of January, jump back into gym because now that's their intent to do that. But they hit it a bit too hard. They bite off more than they can chew. They probably hurt themselves. They get fatigued. They become disillusioned, so they stop. And that's because they've tried to grab a little bit too much of what they want. And so what I would like to suggest is just do 1% better every day. And then there is some science-backed evidence of taking a thing that works and stacking on top of that. So, for example, when I get out of bed in the morning, if I trip over my gym bag, if I've placed my sneakers right there with my socks over them, and my gym bag is there and my water bottle is there as I get out of bed, that means that I now, past Karl, has set up future Karl for perhaps a different modality. I can't help but get up and have a look at that, and immediately it's going to go through my head. Shoes, sneakers, socks, gym bag. I promised myself I'd go. So that's what I'm talking about in terms of this ritual-infused habit stacking. Yes. Set up some rituals that help you achieve those goals. So my ritual is going to have my sneakers next to my bed with my gym socks over them, so that the easiest thing in the world for me to do is pick up one and put it on. It would be very hard for me to not do that. I'd have to really reject myself and my intent and the equipment in front of me to step over it and not do that. And then maybe have on your kitchen table your protein shaker and something else. So when you go to your kitchen, you can see, okay, this is part of what I needed to do. I need to get my gym session going. I've got my protein shake there. I've got my gym bag. I've got my towel. So I've got all these little habits, or all these little things stacked in terms of the ritual that I'm going to do for my day, so that I'm changing my behavior slowly over time. Instead of going, I'll go to gym tomorrow, and then you wake up and you just have the thought, I'll go to gym, and you go, the hell I'm going to gym? I'm not going to go to gym. I'm not. And you don't have the visual clues there, the ritual laid out things of what I need to do.
Yeah, I was listening to a podcast just last night actually. It was by Chris Williamson, and what he said, which I found really interesting. I heard it, took it down as a note. But he said, what would you in 24 hours wish that you did today? So essentially just setting yourself up for success. And then that led me to reflect on, what I might have done a year ago, what I might have done 6 months ago. Like, I worked this certain job, and then that's made this aspect of my life easier. So I found that really interesting. One thing we were talking about earlier as well is you said a quote that you heard, which is never teach a child that they have a soul, teach them that they are a soul. Can you explain what that means?
Well, exactly that. And it comes from George MacDonald, where he says, never tell a child you have a soul, rather teach them you are a soul, you have a body. And I think that, because what we do then is, if you say to a child that you have a soul, what does that mean? And where is it? And how can I feel it? And all sorts of things. And what kind of it? Whereas if you say you are a soul, you have a body, that makes it condense into you are this thing. You don't have a soul, you are a soul. And so from being that place of I am that, things can flow outwards. Because otherwise we're tacking this thing on. Another corollary of that is I'm not a human having a spiritual experience. I'm a spirit having a human experience. So if we just flip the narrative slightly there, I'm not a human going through a spiritual thing where I need a spiritual awakening, where I'm damned or good or redeemed or all of these things, or a good soul or a bad soul. I'm a spirit. I'm a soul first, then human later. I think if we think about it that way, and I think if you pause and you put that into your meditative pipe and smoke, it's like, okay, wow, I'm a soul first, then human, instead of human, then soul. So it's just changing that narrative, and that flips it again into that metacognitive thinking where you've just been told something, or you've been advised something, or you've said you have a soul. How about I am a soul, I have a body? So that's something to sit with your meditative space and see where that goes for you, because that's quite juicy.
Yeah. I mean, what's one misconception you think, most people who are in this, say, spiritual journey or whatever you'd want to call it, what's one thing that you see most people get wrong most of the time?
I wouldn't say wrong, right, all sorts of things. What I would suggest though is I think what happens is or I feel that people have been told a little bit too often who they are, what they should be thinking, what they should be feeling, what they should be believing even. So I think one of the biggest misconceptions is being told, being messaged all sorts of things, instead of being able to go, and we can't do this as youngsters. We can't challenge the script then. We can't then, So what I would suggest and what I've seen is take all of the things that you've been told, take all of the things and sit with that in your deep meditative space on a soul level and see what comes up for you. And I think that'll be very different for everyone. And it really ties into, I think, a lot of some dicey areas for a lot of people, the whole concept of good and evil. I think if you have to be told what's good or evil, then we have an issue. I think if you know inherently what is wrong and what is right, that's better. So how do we move to a space of knowing inherently what's wrong and what's right? I mean, First Nations people and early humans from hundreds of thousands ago, before we had the 4,000 or 5,000 religions we've invented, before we had spirit, and we all knew that. We were intrinsically linked with the land. There was no differentiation between the land, the deer, the tree, and me. We were all part of it, and there's this scientific backing, I suppose, where a lot of people are going, oh, does this have consciousness? Does that have consciousness? And I'm like, I think we need to flip the script on that and go, it doesn't have consciousness. Everything is consciousness. Everything is consciousness from source, because there's no divorcing that. There's no separating that. You can't separate creation and everything that we witness and see, and the atoms and the birds and the bees and the vibrational frequencies, any element of that is not conscious. It all is consciousness. So that's the really deep vein that flows through everything, this huge vibrational frequency, which in the beginning was the Word. In the beginning wasn't the hammer and the chisel and the maker. In the beginning was the Word, was the frequency that brought forth. And Ethan, science backs it up more and more. Scientists going down to the smallest little level of the individual fibers and atoms of this couch, and they're telling us, guys, there's nothing down there. We can't see anything. It's just fields of energy. It's fields of potential. It's only when I see it does it collapse into its reality. So we're looking at the intersection of a really cool part of history, or part of where we are, where you're getting, like I said earlier, the woo-woo and the science, and it's fields. Like, I'm technically not touching this. As hard as anything is, science tells us, we can all look this up now, that I can't physically ever touch anything. I'm being repelled by the field of it, by the vibration of it, by the word of it. Who spoke that word? Source. Let's go back there. Let's ask them, because they're the only one who know.
So what's the biggest limiting belief that is holding people back in their careers?
The biggest limiting belief would probably be that old belter, I can't, or I'm not worthy, or I'm not able, or any of those things. So I think, and again, that comes from a lot of societal constructs, or what you've been told, or all these, the accretion of all of the things, again, that come from this external, you're not good enough, and a lot of that is our own internal mind. We take that as kids when you're told, no, you can't do this, boys don't cry, this, that, next thing. So all of the dogma and all of the things that come to us, which we soak up as children, form a set of limitations or limiting beliefs, so that by the time you get to an age and stage, you feel like you can't, because society's told you can't, then you've believed it, and you've extended that same lie. And that's where, again, the meditation of the metacognizance is, you can actually delete that, so to speak. I really do think that you can make a lot of actionable steps towards thinking about that and going, well, I'm actually not that. I can do that. There's certain things, yes, you'll never be able to do. My housemate is one of those dudes who hangs off ropes and cleans the side of buildings. Now, personally, I can't stand on a chair to change a light bulb because I don't like heights like that. So that's my limitation. It's not a self-imposed limitation. That's just my reality, and that's where all the different crayons in the box, we all are different. But I think when it comes to the biggest one is this self-belief of I can't, and how you can challenge that.
Yeah, and how do we flip the script? So, you know, you say it's been passed down from generation to generation. For someone who's gonna have kids, say, what can you do differently for your kids to take away those beliefs?
The biggest thing then, I think then, is to operate out of a model of loving kindness. And I think that's the hugest thing. I read recently, and it sounds, I don't know who this is attributed to, it sounds like one of those generic quotes, or comes from ancient mystical wisdom. The highest form of intelligence is kindness. And I think if you can just get that right in terms of being as kind as possible to yourself and then to those kids, I think you're going to really chip away at some of the generational trauma that comes along, because being kind means that you have to think about it, and just think about their needs. What are their unmet needs, and how can you make sure that you're bringing forth a generation, or a new generation, or the next generation, without some of that trauma that has come down for so many years. And I think what we're looking at now, which is really interesting, Ethan, is the whole construct of this toxic masculinity, and how that infuses a lot of trauma, or is behind a lot of the corporate ladder climbing. You know, you've got the alpha male all parading around like that. And really, for what? You are going to work really hard for someone, and what are you going to achieve at the end of the day? You're going to retire and die. You know, you kind of, most people are making money for a boss type thing. So, and this is really curious for me, and I'm delighted, because here we have this younger generation and going to have kids. What have you thought about that? Like, where are you at with that? What are you going to bring to the table that you weren't given?
Yeah, no, I've thought about this a little bit. Honestly, I find it a hard question to answer, because, you know, we may not have had, you know, much money. Like, we were fine. We were doing okay, but, you know, going to school I went to, I was one of the poorer kids. So that was a bit of a struggle, but I also think, you know, there was a benefit to that, which is I'm not as entitled as some of these other kids who I went to school with. But then again, there may have been some material things that I missed out on, but honestly, at least at the moment, I can't find any fault from my parents. Like, not sure, to be honest. Like, maybe I might find something I wish they did differently later on down the line, but for the moment, yeah, can't complain.
Yeah.
But
And so what is what is your thoughts on, here we have your son put in your arms, for example, on day one. What is your immediate thoughts, and how are you going to make sure that that human is as developed into this evolved higher state of thinking that we hope to achieve? And yeah, funds, money can't buy you happiness, but it can make you look for it in the best places, and crying in a Mercedes and all sorts of things, but what humanistic soul food, or what are you going to give your son to make sure that that person or daughter or whoever their expression is, to make them an evolved higher human than some of the people we have on the planet?
yeah, I mean, one thing I've considered is, in the future, God willing, I plan to be financially comfortable. But one of my friends, the way he was raised, his dad's very successful, but he's got really good character, very humble guy. And he told me the way that he was raised is, his dad was fine, he was well off, but he was raised under the impression that they were struggling financially, that they, didn't have much money for stuff. And I thought that was awesome. Like, it teaches you work on your own.
Yeah.
Like, take some initiative to get what you want. But also, just the main principle would be the main Christian values. Main one for me would just be based on love. I feel like that's just the most fundamental thing you can do.
Well, there you go. And I'd like to, I'm just delighted and ecstatic, because that for me feels like the correct answer. Because when we're infusing our next generation with so much more love than previous have got, and across whatever metric or however you choose to believe or express it, that love, that loving kindness, that consistent guidance, I kind of in my mind went to this future where you have young Ethan or whoever they are, and I do see and feel that human will be equipped with love. So it's amazing that you've thought about it in that way. And yeah, life is tough, and things are going to happen that are unwelcome, and pain is a huge part of the journey. What another thing that I've learned as well, and this came from a really, really powerful teacher from ages ago, is that pain is inevitable. It's the suffering that's optional. So and again, using that lens of love, Ethan, is really the best way, because this is what all of the messengers have told us. Everyone, from the spiritual traditions of Buddhism, which is loving kindness, to the Christian faith that you and I were brought up in, where that message from Christ was love one another as I have loved you. My simple message is love, 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 love. And in fact, all of the other religions do preach the aspect of that tolerance or that love angle. And yet when we go outside in our day-to-day lives or daily living, my question then to you, perhaps not to answer now, to the audience or anyone, is, where is the love? We've been told this by messages from beyond the stars, from source itself: love one another, loving kindness. And that's something that I think modern society has got a bit of a lacking in. So I think when we go down to the meditation of self, that metacognition, how do I restructure myself and the way I engage with the world to be another brick in the wall that lays a foundation of love? My own trauma comes from a place of where I'd react with rage very quickly, or be prone to anger and rage very, very quickly. And I was very disconnected or de-linked from love. And so tapping back into that frequency is like, oh wow, this feels right. It's my birthright. It comes from above. It's the message that we've been told. So really, really delighted, that that's your prime mandate for the next generations that, you're going to be responsible for.
Yeah, and just to take a step back to the limiting beliefs idea, one thing I was thinking about earlier is a few years ago when I first sort of became interested in this whole idea of success, one thing I had was maybe, I don't know how to phrase it correctly, but maybe not enough limiting beliefs, a bit too much confidence. Like, I remember speaking to one of my dad's friends, and the way I would phrase it was, there's no other way, no other course of action, but it's just going to be me succeeding. Like, there's nothing else that can happen. Yeah, 100% I will succeed. And over the last couple of years, it's certainly changed to, maybe not, but that's why you're working to minimize the risk of that happening. But is there a line where you might not have enough limiting beliefs and you might need to be a bit more humble and take a step back and actually look at yourself?
I think there's flip sides to that coin, because I was watching one of your previous podcasts about having that confidence woven with humility. Now, of course, whenever you have too much of something, it does express as overmuch, and then that can be a limiting factor. So whenever you're taking something, you want to temper it with something else. You want to make an alloy of something really cool that works for you, that's more malleable. And quite certainly, confidence is great. But when you're dialing it up into this outrageous cockiness, I think what happens there, and my question back at you is, when you were saying, I'm going to have success, this hell-bent success, was that something that you were saying, or were you believing it, or were you feeling it?
All of them. Saying it, fully believed it throughout, my whole being. And
how did you feel it though?
With great passion.
Did you?
Yeah.
Really?
I believe so. I was a bit younger and a bit dumber.
Yeah.
But yeah, I truly believe I did it. And I think part of it was, to use the word you used, woo-woo, for the whole idea of manifestation, a lot of it can be that woo-woo, but I do believe there is a scientific and real application to it. And I do think what I was doing that time was strongly manifesting what I want, because I was reading a book, Think and Grow Rich, and one thing they said was, the clearer your image of where you want to be is, the more attainable it becomes. So I was very clear on, this is where I want to be, this is my goals.
Yep.
And I truly believed it. So that's where I was sort of at.
And Ethan, did you believe it in your head or your heart? If you really pause to think about that, where did you believe it mostly?
That's a good question. Because I want to say heart, but the motivations were in my head, because it was all about, money, personal pride, and all of that. Yeah. So yeah, I do relate the whole idea of, you need a lot of money and all of that to a head ambition instead of heart ambition. So yeah, I guess it was in my head as much as I want to say it was in my heart. Yeah.
Well, there you go. And I think what happens when you link onto the manifestation side of things, because you can say as many mantras and manifestations and affirmations as you want, and you can repeat them ad nauseum, and you can write 6 times all of the things you want. When it's driven by your head, I don't believe that the universe looks at you. I don't believe the universe is interested. Because here we have yet another headspace entity using just the meatball inside its main sensory organ to attempt to do anything. And I don't believe that's the case. Here's a little experiment that I'd like you to perhaps think of and do. And this has certainly helped me change, because I also used to be in my head a lot about the expectations of where I'm going to go and what's going to happen. And I manifested so damn hard in my head that nothing happened. And I think when we have a look at the commonality of the how and why our manifestations, perhaps yours, perhaps mine, and so many others, don't come to fruition as they want, is because we're headspace forcing it. And what happens then is the universe disengages because there's billions of minds on the planet. And so here's what I did very recently is I realized that I was running around in my head. I was on the hamster wheel of clawing affirmations, clawing manifestation, attempting to get all of these things. And it wasn't quite working. And then I realized that the brain as an organ, I have trust issues with it. My brain lies to me very, very often and is prone to a catastrophe of things such as anxiety, over worry, waking up, doom scrolling in my mind, all sorts of mind mental programming that happens inside my head. And I actually was quite over it. It became very exhausting. And this is part of a modern life. The mill of the mind is something that really grinds us. So I went into the lift lobby in my head. Everyone has a lift lobby in their head. You can decide what it looks like in terms of the lift, the marble, the whatever kind of lift mechanism or structure you have. It's yours. It's wherever it is. So I went into the lift lobby and I opened the lift. Not been there in quite some time, a very, very, very long time, I'm sad to say. And the lift opened and I went inside and I was quite amazed. There's two buttons, which I'll tell you about now. There's a B button for brain and an H button for heart. And it's a system that only goes between the brain and the heart. And I went inside and I pressed the H button. And as the lift door closed, I just leant out and I went like this to the brain. I was like, brain, I've had enough. Quite honestly, you've lied to me. You've done all these things. You've dragged me from one corporate role to the other. I've followed you blindly and I've followed the teachings and the scripts that you've put in there. No more. So you are on autopilot, brain. You're just going to keep the meat puppet alive. You're going to make him go through the motions. You're going to make sure that he is maintained and goes through this survival that he has been in terms of the surviving that he has, because most of us are in survival mode, right? And the lift doors closed and I listened to my really awesome techno, which is in my lift, of course. Everyone's got different music. And I went down to the heart level and opened up in the heart, and it was just a really profound experience. I felt something instead of thinking something. And when I felt something, it was quite amazing. And I looked inside this chamber of the heart, massive big round atrium. Everyone's different. You can think of it as you want. However, Ethan, what's really amazing is that science has told us very recently that inside of your heart, inside a human heart, are around 40,000 neurocytes inside a human heart. Again, Google it, human heart, neurocytes. Science tells us this is true. Now, a neurocyte is a brain cell, neural cell. And so what these little neurocytes do is they hold and they store memories. Your heart can do that because it's got neurocytes. It's got cells that do that. There's only one other place that there's neurocytes, and that's in your brain. Neurological disorders or brain disorders. So neurocytes live in your brain and your heart. Scientists now tell us, and I was like, wow, that's amazing. So that's where all the trauma is stored, and that's where all the memories are stored, and that's where the desires to succeed are, and that's where the manifestation record goes on and starts playing the new music. And when that happened, Ethan, I felt something in my heart. I felt something, and I felt a newer vibrational frequency, because the brain waves are noise. The heart frequency is something else. And we do talk about this a lot. We say heart-centered being, from the heart, from the bottom of my heart, all sorts of things. We've got multiple instances of language across all sorts of humans where I was led by the heart, you know. And so there's a lot of, now we're marrying the woo-woo and the science again. There's neurocytes there. And I think what happened then is, I can't prove it. However, a huge amount of events have happened in my life since December that demonstrate to me that the universe has now gone, what? Wow, look at this one. This one's gone from the noise to the heart. We're gonna spend some time watching this, because this frequency, this is good. We're gonna work with this one. Because he's dialed out of the noise. He's taken the lift down to the heart. So I think then you can move into that heart space place. And I'm feeling now that is opening up. And I would suggest that you perhaps, or invite you in your quiet meditation time, to take that lift down, imagine the lobby, imagine all of the things, make that your manifestation and move physically your consciousness, your mind. Where does your mind reside? No one knows. You can't say it was your pinky toe or anywhere. You get to move your mind down into your heart. Sit with that, buddy. That's pretty profound. And then go, what's next, heart? And eventually the lotus blossom opens, and that's where you move from your heart. And then, of course, you need your mind to navigate all of that. I'm not going back up to brain level for a while. I'm loving the heart space. It's really gorgeous. Got some pretty damaged neurocytes that I need to polish up and have a look at and go through and move through. But ultimately, it's all good.
What's one thing that you think the younger generation is lacking and that we should seek more through mentorship these days?
Well, that is a very good question. And I think the younger generation of today is lacking exactly what I was lacking when I was in the younger generation. And we can go back down quite some time. Is that we're lacking our own authentic voice. We're lacking the ability to advocate for ourselves. We're lacking the ability to go, no, that's wrong. And I think there's so many cool and amazing things happening now in terms of disrupting the status quo. We're hearing so much more of disrupt or deconstruct, or that needs to be broken down. And I think for right reason, because if we look traditionally at the way the planet has been run over the past 200 years or since the Industrial Revolution, is it has been go, 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 produce, 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 consume, consume, consume. And unfortunately, we've done it to such a degree that the planet's not faring too well. We are seeing some changes in weather. Whatever anyone's stance on global warming is, there are certainly disrupting events happening. And we are seeing the scientists saying and seeing demonstrated evidence of impacted sort of weather events. So I think we've not really run the planet too well. So we've delivered consistently a broken message that does need to change. So yeah, I think what the youngsters are lacking, they're making up for it very quickly by saying so far and no further. I mean, Greta Thunberg stood up and captured the world's imagination, you know, and I think that, yeah, there's more space for youngsters to go, well, what have we been given? We've been given a set of expectations, of norms, of all these things that's not worked for you guys. So this needs to change. How do we change that? And you need to have mentors, or you need to have people to work with in terms of that. Works bloody well for the tradies or the apprenticeship. You know, if you want to become a Sparky, or if you want to do anything in the olden days, you'd find the old boy who'd burnt himself, who'd electrocuted himself, and the old guy would teach the way because he's done it so many times through experience, and he's able to gently guide the new ones through. So I think if you look at the entire evolution of history, it's been people who've shown and guided the way.
Amazing. I appreciate you coming on. It's been great speaking to you.
Too easy. Well, thanks, Ethan. It's been really great. Really, really enjoyed it. And I hope everyone else has got some great value out of it as well.
Till next time. Thank you.